I'm joined now by Republican Senator David Perdue of Georgia, who was part of that leadership meeting with President Trump today at the White House. Senator Perdue, welcome back to the show, sir.
Hi, Chuck.
Let me start with what was discussed today on the president's legislative priorities, and I want to first start with health care. Did you get more specifics today on where things are headed?
Well, what we had today was a business meeting by the President of the United States telling us what his objectives were, what the mission was, what everybody's role was, and what he expected. I'm very excited that we've got a guy who is leading right now and moving at a business pace, not a government pace. So we talked about health care primarily, and it was an extremely encouraging conversation, and he laid out his expectations very clearly. I am so proud of the job he did last night, Chuck, in his speech. He laid out a vision for America, and today was a follow-up to that to say, okay, it's time to get down to work.
Well, let's get into some of the weeds here. I want to have you help me parse some of the phrases he used on health care. He said last night, we should ensure that Americans with pre-existing conditions have access to coverage. Now, does this mean that not all insurance companies will have to offer insurance that covers all pre-existing conditions? Does that mean folks with some pre-existing conditions are going to be in a special risk pool? Is that what that signals?
Well, I don't think he was sending a signal about the specific about a risk pool or anything else. What he's saying was, inherently, prior to Obamacare, you had the insurability issue. You had people who had pre-existing conditions and could not get coverage. We've got to make sure that those people that got that coverage keep that coverage. And so that was one of the objectives that he set out weeks ago when we started talking about this. But what I hear the president talking about is this is not a question of coming up with a utopian plan versus a pretty good plan. This is a talk about an alternative to a failed plan. Right now in my home state, Chuck, 99 counties out of 159 only have one insurance carrier. Our costs are up dramatically, our deductibles are up dramatically, but more importantly, if this carrier pulls out of our state, people in 99 counties will not have any insurance carrier.
Let me ask you, though, about the issue of Medicaid funding. Is this something your state did not take the Medicaid dollars, so there isn't expansion there in your state. It is in other states. This is, and essentially it broke down on partisan lines for the most part. There are some Republican governors who did take it. Yeah. Are we headed to all block grant on Medicaid, or is there going to be more flexibility here from the federal government?
Well, what we heard from the governors just this week is that they want more flexibility, and they met with the president. The president talked about that publicly this week. So I think that's what they're asking for, and I think there's an appetite to do that. Look, we've got solutions at some state levels that are working right now, and we need to make sure we give those governors the opportunity to do that. I applaud my state governor for not stepping into this. I believe that we're in a much healthier position now to make the change that will be coming.
What do you say to the rural hospitals, though, in your state that have felt as if they've been underfunded and that the lack of the Medicaid expansion has hurt them much more than it should?
Well, it's a very real problem, and our state government is on that right now. I believe that this is one of the things that has to be addressed in this bill, and I'm confident it will be. Look, we've also got the issue that not only do you have to have a provider, but you got to have a hospital that accepts that provider, and that's another complication that we're having right now in my home state. I saw that with my own mother over the last year. So this is a very complicated issue, and again, we're looking for a solution that gets us an opportunity to avoid the disaster that is Obamacare if and when it collapses. And
I know there's a little bit of a family dispute on the idea of tax credits versus tax deductions. Yeah. Where do you stand on this? And for those to not speak in Washington speak here, essentially, with the government, for folks that don't pay new money back in for taxes, a tax deduction doesn't do them any good for health care. They need basically some cash to buy the insurance. Where do you stand on this?
Well, we've got to make sure if we're going to provide and help everybody have access to insurance, we have to find a way to help these people fund that. The deductibility versus the credit are two different things. One penalizes really low-income people who aren't working. So we're going to make sure that that's vetted. Right now, I just want to make sure everybody has access to coverage. Today, that's not necessarily the case because of the price that has risen in the last 2 years or so on the price of health care. Look, we got another issue here.
Sounds like you do lean, but by the way, does sound like you lean towards the tax credit idea.
Yeah, I do, personally. But look, I'm going to support something that will never get to 100% of what I want, Chuck. And this is what every senator and every House member has to come to grips with. What we have to do is to save a situation that is actually off the rails right now. I can't emphasize too importantly that we have a situation that's going to end up in a dire situation for a lot of people in this country unless we do something very, very quickly here.
Let me, very quickly before I let you go, infrastructure. The president hinted, and so did Speaker Ryan to some of us in a meeting earlier in the day, that when you hear the words $1 trillion, it's not going to be $1 trillion in government money, that it will be $1 trillion in impact, so some combination of public-private. Is that your understanding, so that the infrastructure bill, the price tag is smaller than $1 trillion?
Well, what I heard the president say last night is a public-private partnership idea, which we've already been doing. USAID put $8 billion up and attracted more than $45 billion in a public-private partnership called Power Africa. It's going to work, and it will work. That principle can work in our infrastructure. Isn't it interesting that we have a business guy in the White House talking about real business solutions about infrastructure, and he knows how important infrastructure is to growing the economy. And by the way, Obamacare, taxes, regulation, job one, and let's don't forget this, is growing the economy. The president reminded us of that last night. He reminded us at lunch again about that. This is his main emphasis right now.
Well, I got to ask you, though, if job one is the economy, shouldn't he be leading with the infrastructure bill?
Well, that'd be nice, except that Obamacare is a situation that's about to run off the rails. This is an emergency situation, in my opinion, that we've got to act and act quickly to protect the people who need the protection the most, Chuck. And that's what he's also said.
So you believe health care's got to go first?
Oh, it absolutely does. Absolutely.
Right. Senator David Perdue, I got to leave it there. Yeah. Always a pleasure to have you on and to have you share your views. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Chuck. See you.